Hello there! Welcome to Skeleton Key Productions. I'm Crown Grace Kokon. Let's get into the video. Today's video we're asking the question of, actually, we're not asking that question. So the video which I was going to do is going to come next week, which is going to be on William Jennings Bryan. But in today's video, we're going to be looking at Hitler's fallacies, right? So this is top 4 fallacies. Now, recently, I've finished reading his second book, the Zweig's book. Yes, Hitler actually wrote 2 books. You know, everyone always knows about Mein Kampf. But actually, it was a situation where, so he wrote Mein Kampf, published it, but in those early days before he came to power, not many people had actually read it. And so his publisher advised, before you release a second book, let's just hold back on it, right? Because it will affect the sales of Mein Kampf negatively, right? But within the Zweig's book, that basically is a book which focuses on foreign policy. So many years before I'd read Mein Kampf, and so I wasn't going to read the whole thing again because I basically remember most of it. So because I'd finished reading Zweig's book, I decided that what I was going to do is make a video, which is kind of a follow-on from the video we did last week talking about appeasement. So definitely check that video out. But within this, what we're going to basically look at is what ideas came to Hitler, right, which it turned out to just be wrong on all accounts, right? So no one's an island, right? Everyone is affected by the ideas which are floating around them at the time. And so within this story, what we're going to do is we're going to look at Hitler, the person, right? And rather than just looking at just, evil man that he was, right? Because the thing is, as Jordan Peterson says, right, it's the situation where each of us has the capacity to do great good and great evil, right? And if we don't recognize that, if we can distance ourselves from the great evildoers of history, then it means that we won't really understand the lessons, right? If we don't look at ourselves and see how we could end up basically become like Hitler, then we will never fully understand history and we'll never really understand the human spirit. So within this video, I'm going to give a very, very brief biography of Hitler. Not exactly a very in-depth one, but just touching on some of the things which influenced him in his early days that many people won't know about. Okay, so within this, I want you to picture yourself, right? You are Adolf Hitler and you're 18 years old, right? Now, your father, a few years ago, died, right? And you had a very strained relationship with him. He used to beat you quite a lot, etc. And in particular, after one of your younger brothers died, so when you were like 10 years old or 11, your younger brother died. So before, you used to be like a very outgoing person, very cheerful person, etc. But after your brother died, you end up becoming a very withdrawn person, and also you became very rebellious both towards your father and towards your teachers, right? Now, your father, because of the nature of his work, he ended up moving about quite a lot. So it's very difficult for you to kind of settle down and have like a close group of friends and close people that were around you. So as a result of all this, you kind of felt very detached from people. And on top of that, your father was very strict and said, right, I want you to go to a trade school. I want you to go to the so-called real school, which is like a German word for like a trade school, basically. And I want you to study there. However, in your solitude, you found art to be a good outlet, for how you're feeling, and you end up actually being quite good at art as well. But your father is insisting you have to go to this real school, and so as a result of that, out of protest, you've purposely failed, which means that you don't actually end up passing secondary school. Now, this will have later consequences in your life, which at that time you won't necessarily see. So at the age of 18, you leave your little town and you end up going to settle in Vienna, Austria, which is obviously a massive, massive city. And it's there that you try to apply to art school. Now, art school rejects you not once, but twice, right? And says that your artwork, it's good, but what it would be better is that if you went to an architectural school, because your paintings, when it comes to painting people, is not like so great or detailed. But when it comes to painting buildings, it's very, very detailed. So it would probably be your best bet to go to architect school. However, for you to go to architect school, you had to pass secondary school. So you see, as a result of some of the things that really happened to him, he then was not able to then go on to become an architect. And then later that year, your mother dies, right? So your mother is the light of your life. She's really, really kind. She's really and although your father beats you, your mother is very doting and basically makes you think that you're the best thing that ever existed, right? Even when you were playing with your siblings, you always want to be the leader. You always thought yourself to be special and that you were destined for great things. And so with the death of your mother, you end up basically thinking, well, basically, the whole world's finished, yeah. But on top of that, you're an orphan in a strange city at 18, and you've been rejected from the career choice of your life. So now fast forward 2 years and you're 20 and you're basically unemployed, you're basically homeless in a strange city, yeah, you're an orphan, everything in your life has just been ruined, and this is you. This is you now, thinking about you back when you were 18 or 20, put yourself in all this situation, and then you'll understand a little bit of where Hitler was at this point in his life. Now, like many Germans living in the Austro-Hungarian Empire at that time, they had really seen the rise of the German Reich, the Second German Reich, the German Empire under the Kaisers, and so for them, they basically was like, okay, we have the choice between, the German Reich, which is a unified German state, or we have the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which is basically just a mishmash of all different ethnicities and nationalities, and it's just a complete mess, right? How can we, as patriots, feel any pride in what is basically the hangover of this kind of like medieval kind of thing, this Austrian Empire under the Habsburg? So this is the conundrum which many of them felt, and so as a result of this, many of them felt very detached from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. As a matter of fact, when the Austro-Hungarian national anthem would play, they instead would sing the German national anthem, because they felt much more attachment and pride with that. So now that Hitler's out in Vienna, right, and he's down in the dumps, he's homeless, everything's all just really really terrible at this time, and in Vienna, obviously, it's a very cosmopolitan city, like kind of, has many different ethnicities from all around the empire. And on top of that, around this time, you end up having pogroms taking place in the Tsarist Empire, within Russia. So many Jews fleeing from Poland and from Ukraine and many other places are coming to settle as refugees in Vienna. And the people there are very, very hostile to this, right? And in particular, they end up being whipped up by a very, very influential person that almost no one has heard of. And even before doing this, even I hadn't heard of him, right? And this person is George Ritter von Schonen. As with always, I've probably butchered his pronunciation because I'm terrible with foreign names. But von Schonen, he was a populist politician living in Vienna at the time, and he was very, very influential within Austrian politics. And so this is the man who, more than anyone else, influenced the young Adolf, right, in terms of how he'd be in terms of like as a future leader. So what exactly was von Schonen's belief? Well, first of all, he was a pan-German, so very similar to Hitler. He believed that the German-speaking people within Austria and within the Austrian Empire, they should join with the rest of the German Reich. And on top of that, he was very anti-clerical, so he was like very anti kind of the power of the Catholic Church, which had a very dominant position within the Austrian Empire. And on top of that, with regard to his supporters, he encouraged them to refer to him as the Führer, and whenever they would greet with each other, it would be with the Heil, right? So Hitler adopted many of these things, and of course one of the main things which he adopted was von Schonen's anti-Semitism. So although von Schonen was a very wealthy man, and his father had worked for the House of Rothschild, and like he become very wealthy and like was involved in like the railway industry, etc., etc. Although he came from a great lot of wealth, how he appealed to the masses was by targeting these Jewish refugees and other Jews who live within Austria, and basically saying they are the reason for all of your problems. Yeah, like these people are the enemy. As a matter of fact, he even said the famous line of, either we expel the Jews or the Jews will expel the Germans, right? So this gives you an idea of just how vicious this man was in terms of his anti-Semitism. And actually, he ended up being kicked out of the Austrian parliament as a result of, being arrested, yeah. And the reason he was arrested is because he made an attack on a Jewish newspaper because they dared to preemptively print the death of the German Kaiser. So the German Kaiser, Wilhelm I, he died in 1888, I believe. And so just because they printed his death a little bit before he ended up actually dying, this man went to this place and attacked many of the people there. And so although he was arrested, what ended up happening is that there was a great deal of support for him. So he had actually a surge in support for his party. So while he wasn't allowed to return to parliament, he ended up having a lot of political gains as a result of that. He still remained a very influential person within Austrian politics. So Hitler's seen all these things and going, this is something which I can kind of get behind it. This is something which I will bear in mind in future, and which will basically shape me for the rest of my life. And on top of that, of course, by the time Hitler's 25, the Great War starts. Yeah, by this time he'd moved to Munich. Throughout the next 4 years, he ends up being a war hero, and basically, he ends up getting a medal and stuff. So he fights very, very bravely. But by the end of the war, he comes to see it as not only just a waste of German life and just a waste of like resources, etc., but also that there's a stab in the back, that there's a betrayal, right? So you've been fighting on the front lines for 4 years. You come back as a 29-year-old and you see a ruined Germany. The Germany which you fought for is no longer there. All of your fellow soldiers were fighting on foreign territory, and no allies actually invaded Germany itself, and yet you guys were defeated because of these politicians who were in the rear guard, right? So all of this led to his belief that basically the Jews were behind this, and that they were the source of Germany's downfall, and that they were the reason for why Germany was suffering under the Versailles Treaty, and that it was his job, it was his mission to basically undo all of this and restore German pride and German nationalism. So now that we've covered all of the things which basically went into Hitler, right? What we have to look at is the top 4 fallacies which basically completely threw Hitler off course, just led him down a very, very dark path, right? And that's what we're going to get into now. Because, of course, no one is a complete genius. No one has all information, right? And when that much power is put in the hands of anyone, people are bound to make mistakes. And actually, within all of this, this is what I want to basically talk about. So this is kind of the conclusion of the video. A few years ago, one of my work colleagues, made a good point to me, because I'm obviously very interested in politics, and asked her about what's your views on politics. And she said to me something which was very, very profound, which is that with politics, no matter what policy you end up implementing, someone somewhere is going to be negatively affected by it, right? So, if you raise taxes, someone's going to be negatively affected. If you lower taxes, people are going to be negatively affected. If you nationalize things, then people are going to be negatively affected. And if you privatize things, people are going to be, etc., and in infinitum, right? Or in infinitum, whatever the Latin phrase is. But the point is that no matter what policies you want to do, someone somewhere is going to be negatively affected by it. And therefore, all of us have to look in on ourselves and think, right, the things that we want, the policies that we want, how will they negatively affect someone, right? Because you're not going to be able to please all the people. Someone's going to be hurt by the policies that you want. And actually, the less that you understand about human nature, the less that you understand about economics, the less you understand about history and philosophy and all the rest of it, right? The less you understand about all these things, the more likely it is that you're going to make mistakes which are going to hurt people. So all of these things which were laid out here, right? Even if you don't have a single one of these fallacies which Hitler believed in, right? You invariably have some fallacies, right? You invariably have some mistakes. You invariably have things which, if they were implemented, would hurt someone. So, for instance, for me, I'm an English nationalist. I believe that England ought to be separate from the United Kingdom. But then, with that policy there, I'm fully in recognition that negatively affects British Unionists who live in Scotland, who live in Wales, and who live in Northern Ireland. Similarly, as well, those people in favour of United Ireland, people who are Ulster Unionists, they're going to be negatively affected. And then similarly, if there's no United Ireland, then the Irish nationalists are going to be negatively affected by this, right? So no matter what policy you want, it's going to affect someone. And so what one has to do as much as possible is base one's politics on coherent and firm principles, right? Which you don't just change, etc., but which also you allow a level of flexibility where you go, actually, not everyone has the view that I have, right? That's a big part of living in a pluralistic liberal democracy. It's understanding that, I might think, oh, I hate the rich, but then what if my mate wants to set up a company, right? And ends up becoming wealthy? How's that going to negatively affect him? And, I want this, I want that. Whatever it is, we have to understand that we're all human, and that in a democracy, we will have different views, right? And that no one is more valuable than any other person. And when we understand that, we're much less likely to think that we have all the answers, and we actually humble ourselves and we listen more rather than just talk, which is essentially what all big-headed people like myself often end up doing. So in conclusion to that, we're going to basically end this video and basically say that, I hope that you like it, and also don't forget to share this with people as well. Hit the like button, and obviously subscribe as well. We're trying to obviously reach 2,000 subs, like we said. I think it can be done by Christmas. I'm very optimistic about that, but invariably someone is going to be hurt somewhere. Although then again, YouTube's not a zero-sum game. If you want to sub to me, then you can sub to other channels as well. It's not going to hurt anyone. It helped me out quite a lot. Yeah, so the next video is going to be on William Jennings Bryan. I absolutely promise it is going to be, unless I think of something else. But yeah, in the meantime, have a great day and bye.